Good evening. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for Recasting the Culture, which is the new Creating in Color. I had to change the name because as I was doing research and branding and things like that, I was like, oh, there's another Creating in Color podcast that's kind of similar. So, yeah, I'm going to change the name. My name is Nicole Young Martin, and I'm the producer and host of this series. Many of you may recognize me from the award-winning podcast Black Writers Read, which just finished its 5th season. My apologies. I'm menopausing right now. My eyes are super, super dry. Highlighting the work of BIPOC creatives and innovators, Recasting the Culture offers an insight look into the practice and process of writers, musicians, visual artists, curators, community leaders, and educators whose work challenges conventions, redefines culture, and promotes social transformation. Essentially, it's an excuse for me to bring on some of my friends and other cool people doing amazing work focused on community building, equity, inclusion, and creative practice. Recasting the culture will serve as Black Writers Read's off-season show. I'll be coming to you from my home in New England, or I now have an office. So I'm excited about that with the series from mid-June through mid-August while Black Writers Read is on hiatus. If you have conversations you've missed on Black Writers Read, check us out online at blackwritersread.com. We are also available on Instagram at Black Writers Read. Today is an opportunity for us to chat with Kenyatta Muzzanni Robles ahead of their screening of their film Be Here Now, which is going to be on this Thursday, July 10th. I'm going to be sharing information about it throughout our conversation, and it's going to be in Hampton, Connecticut. Kenyatta Muzzanni Robles is a queer Black writer, organizer, and filmmaker. They live at the intersection of arts and organizing, a duality that comes natural to them having grown up in the Brownsville neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York. Actually, I have a question for them about that. Their writing has been published in the Hartford Courant, Aislin Magazine, Harvesting Chaos, Seed Packets for Liberation, and elsewhere. They are a 2024 Brew Forge Fellow and a 2025 Mark-Natham Social Justice Fellow. In 2025, Kenyatta released their debut short film, Be Here Now, which we'll talk a little bit about later in the interview. Kenyatta is also the founder and director of Action Art Labs, a social change organization that combines community organizing and storytelling to build power. When not working, Kenyatta can be found running on a trail, foraging the fungi, or spending time with their spouse in New England. Actually, it's through their spouse how I know them. Their spouse and I went to grad school together. Kenyatta will be screening Be Here Now on Thursday, July 10th at 6 p.m. at the Whitneyville Cultural Commons, 1253 Whitney Avenue in Hampton, Connecticut. Wearing a mask is required to attend this event, so please come prepared. For more information, and I'll be sharing this link throughout our conversation, and to RSVP in advance, please visit their website. I'm going to pull up this information right now so here's their website right here, kmrobles.com. And for the event, I'll be sure to add that link later. So it'll be kmrobles.com/events. And then you'll find the event there for this Thursday. So before I welcome our guest onto the virtual stage, this is similar to Black Writers Read. If you have a question, please feel free to put it in the comment section where you're joining us from today. We typically have people joining us from Facebook and YouTube, and I will insert them at an appropriate time during our conversation or hold them towards the end for our guest. I'd now like to welcome Kenyatta Muzzanni Robles to the virtual stage. Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much. This is just a wonder to be here, and I'm so appreciative.
Yeah, I was just like, I just realized how fast I was talking. I was like, because I'm around middle schoolers all day during the summer, and I'm like, all this energy, and I'm just like, wait, I'm home now. I'm with my people. I can calm down.
You can slow it down. Listen, I just spent the weekend with some of my nieces and nephews who are ranging between the ages of 2 and 9, so I really feel you.
2 and 9, that's like generations apart.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of skibbity toilet, a lot of, although that's not as popular now, but did come up a couple of times during the weekend.
Oh, I'm like, oh, okay. So the first question that I have for you is, and I love that you and I get to talk about a lot because I've always wanted to talk with someone who leads through I feel like your work leads through your intersecting identities, which I think is really, really cool. And I do that a lot on Black Writers Read with many other writers. I've never done it with another artist practicing in another medium. So I'm really excited for today. So I absolutely love the ways you show up for yourself, your creative practice, and the community. Can you share with us the origin story or stories of how you became a filmmaker, writer, and organizer?
Hmm. Great first question. And again, I just want to express how much I'm so excited to be here with you. You are such a dope convener of spaces and a phenomenal
Thank
writer. Stephanie
you.
has shared some stuff with me, so it is
Oh,
like an honor to be here.
thank you.
So my origin story, I didn't really respect myself as an artist until 2 years ago. And that is something that I feel like is a big part of my story. And I like to share that now that I'm doing more of this work. So even though I didn't really respect myself as an artist, I would say my origin story as a writer came from a very young age. My first loves were reading, writing, and science in that order. So I was like a little baby scientist and just loved to learn. And I've always been a person, especially as a young person, I wrote a lot of short stories on just things that were interesting to me, whether they were about dragons or about my life or just short stories like that. My identity as an organizer, I think, is one that I spent a lot more time in my adult life, adolescence, like transitioning to adulthood, really leaning into. And that's because I had teachers who were incredibly radical and gave me a radical education from a young age. So I really, really respect and appreciate the educators I had in my life who taught me about organizing, who taught me about what it meant to stand in solidarity with people, with working class people across the globe, and have a really like global, well-rounded perspective in high school. So that I think has transitioned to a lot of my adult life where I spent so much time in policy and spent a lot of time amending the criminal justice system. It is not fixing a broken system because it works exactly how it is designed
Yep.
against Black and Brown and poor people. But that is an identity I think that I've held for a long time. And it wasn't until 2 years ago where I was at a real crossroads in my life. I had just gotten married. I had moved to be in New England with my partner, or in a different part of New England. And so much had changed in my life. And I wanted to communicate not just through organizing. And that's where I started picking up my writing a little bit more. And as a filmmaker, I've always loved the medium of communicating via video, but I didn't really see myself in that space in a serious way until I started performing and realizing that, something is missing from my live performances. I'm fusing audio, I'm editing my own audio, I'm using essentially like a loop pedal and speaking to myself and playing multiple roles at the same time. And I wanted to communicate and experiment through film. And so it was really over these past like 2 years that I've really started to trust myself and really lean into my identity as a writer and a filmmaker, in addition to being an organizer.
Wow. Nice. So this leads nicely into the next question. Which of these identities do you lead with first and why? Filmmaker, writer, organizer, Black, queer.
I love this. And I was reflecting on Pat Hills Collins' Matrix of Domination. I believe that, especially for Black and queer, which one I lead with often will change on my context. Am I in a space that is incredibly anti-Black? Am I in a
Mm.
more homophobic space? Especially like I grew up around our people and my people. So I wasn't until adulthood when I moved, we'll get into that, and like for college and where I live now, where I have been around uh, m- less people of color. But I think it really changes on the context. But truthfully, I think I'm Black first. It is
Mm.
what you see, it is what you feel. And I think that is often just because, coming back to Matrix of Domination, in this country, that is the identity in which was oppressed first, that I can feel like that conscious oppression, having grown up in the projects, having grown up in the hood in New York, and like, oh, there is a big difference. Even though all the people look like me, there's a reason all the people look like me in my community, but don't look like me on television, or don't look like me in, you know, certain spaces. And as an artist, I definitely think the writer sits at the crux. Without my ability to communicate with others, usually through writing, or truthfully, without the ability to communicate with myself first, to then be able to translate it to others, I don't think I would be able to flourish in any medium, whether it's live performance, filmmaking, or even organizing.
Yeah, and I keep having this conversation with my students, both the middle schoolers that I'm teaching this summer and then my college students. And I'm teaching adjunct right now at different places. I teach traditional age students at one college, a mix of traditional age and adult learners at one, and then adult learners at the other. And one of the things that I keep telling them is, and it's sad because they haven't thought about that, I'm very interested in what draws people to what they watch and listen to. And I don't want to assume your age. I kind of know what Stephanie's age is, but I grew up in like the 80s with my formative years, like the late 80s and the early 90s, and thinking about what was on television and things like that. Yeah, we had a lot of Black figures on television, but yeah, we had a lot of the respectability politics and things on television. Like I will never forget like I'm kind of getting here. Like my like aspiring hairstyle was Freddie from A Different World.
Yes.
And I'm slowly, it's taking a while, but I'm getting there. And just thinking about like I always question, like, yes, we watch like the Cosby Show as a family and things like that back in the day, but I always just question like why were the kids always getting punished? Or, you know, like why did they have to be a doctor and a, you know, and a lawyer? And why did you know, because I grew up in a two-parent household. They were both very blue collar. My family was very blue collar. And I'm just like, where's that representation? And I think this is why I latched on to Everybody Hates Chris, which we watched yesterday as a family. We couldn't find anything else on. And I was like that, Everybody Hates Chris. If we had that, you know, when I was a child, I feel like I wouldn't have, well, no, I might still be a little bougie with my like wanting to get Le Creuset. Like, well, no, I can't even afford Le Creuset. It's going to be La Cunat. La Cunat. Like, I'm going to get my
Whatever they
La
got.
Cunat. Yeah. So yeah, like I'm curious, like not to give away your age, but like what were some of the like formative, like the television shows and stuff during your formative years that you can remember?
Oh my gosh, let's talk about it. I was going to go there anyway.
Yes.
And also, shout out to you because you work with adult learners and middle schoolers. So, like, that's a lot of switching, like having
It's a lot of switching.
what needs, what language.
Mhm.
And this is so in line because it's in order to really understand who I am. I think even understanding like my age. I'm a '90s kid. I was born in the early '90s, so my formative years felt like late '90s, early 2000s, which is just a wild time to even think of like how time is different. But thinking just I'll answer your question about what shows I watched and what were important to me, but also thinking about that context. I always tend to start that I'm from Brooklyn and Brownsville in particular, and with my age because I grew up during the height of the super predator. I grew up during stop and frisk, post 80s crack epidemic in New York City, and my father is Muslim and I lived through 9/11 in New York. So all of those things make sense to understand why I was radicalized by my high school teachers. It was a matter of like, no, you need to survive. If you are going to survive this public school, you need to know how the world works and what capitalism is, what anti-Blackness is, what global anti-Blackness is, what understanding, you know, why Palestinians are fighting for their liberation. Those types of things I was learning in high school. Back to your question, A Different World was on rotation. Girl, I tried to get everybody and their mama to call me Freddie because
Yes.
nobody called me Freddie, but that was what we had. And
Yeah.
I do believe I grew up in like the UPN. It was UPN 9 in New York, but the
Yup.
UPN 9 renaissance of like I grew up on Moesha. I grew up on Hanging with Mr. Cooper. I grew up on Family Matters, and Family Matters, he was a cop.
Mm-hmm.
Cosby Show, he was a doctor, I believe. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, he was a lawyer.
Oh.
There was a lack of those things. So I grew up on a lot of, I think, those like traditional shows. And truthfully, I also grew up, honestly, because I grew up at the start and the boom of the internet. I also watched a lot of like foreign things. So even when I talk about what inspired me for Be Here Now, I watched a lot of like English television too, because I had access to it. Or I was able to find, those like bootleg copies of shows like The Saddle Club, which are so cheesy, but featured like a black, she was light skinned, she was biracial, all the things. But like the one black girl who rode horses. And I loved horse ride. I was into equestrian when I was younger. So it's like, yeah, I would love to do this. Didn't have access to it unless I was at camp. But I tried to find those types of additional things because I knew what I was just watching on the television was like ultimately like a model minority of what a black family could be if they assume middle class like status, but do it in that way that completely strips them of their cultural identity. Like, yes, the Cosbys were black and had black things, and a lot of their experiences were not so universal to folks across the diaspora, and in many ways can and have contributed to harmful stereotypes of why can't you guys be more like him? And that's a whole thing.
That's a whole thing. And I love how things segue so nicely into the next question. In your bio, you mentioned that you live at the intersection of arts and organizing, a duality that comes natural to them by having grown up in the Brownsville neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York, which I've never heard of, so I'm going to learn a lot today. Now being located in New England, how does the social location of your formative years and the social location of where you are now talk with one another? Are there places that they intersect or battle it out for top spot?
I really appreciate this question. And this is what I mean when I say you're a convener of space, to be able to ask, like, how is where you have grown up talking with and interacting with where you are now? It is so necessary. And I do believe they talk. Just why I feel like I grew up at the intersection of both because of Brownsville. Brownsville, for the longest time, had the reputation of being the most heavily policed area in all the United States.
Wow.
If you read The New Jim Crow, the author of The New Jim Crow cites Brownsville as that. And that book came out, 2011, 20, yeah. So that, was more than a decade ago, but that's the neighborhood I grew up in. And Brownsville is a place of heavy resistance. So I mentioned in high school, I was educated by radical teachers. My AP US history textbook was A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn.
Yes.
Howard Zinn, by the way, is from Brownsville.
I did not know that.
Brownsville went from one ghetto to another where it was predominantly working class Jews, and now it is predominantly working class Black Americans. It went from tenement houses to projects, tenement houses to house the Jews who were immigrating from Europe, projects to house the Black Americans who were migrating from the South during the Great Migration. My grandparents were the first family that moved into the apartment that we had, and I was the last generation to move out. So that was from like the 1940s. Brownsville is a place that has a lot of resistance, I think, because it is a place that historically has been demonized and the people who live there have been demonized. So that's just a little part of why I believe both organizing and arts, a history of resistance with a huge culture. Like the tagline is Brownsville never ran, never will. There's such like a huge culture. So for me, those things are why I feel I sit at the intersection coming from that space. And now here in Massachusetts, where I live, Massachusetts is 9% Black.
It's that much? Sorry. I didn't realize it was not. I thought it was more like 2
It feels like it.
0.000005%.
Half percent.
Half percent.
It feels like it. And I lived in Springfield for 7 years. So like when I first moved here, I'm like, oh, this feels like home. Like, okay, like, and then I now live in not Springfield, and it's like, oh, like
yeah.
It's wild. How I think the two talk to each other. For me, Brownsville, because it is my roots in both organizing and my roots in artistry, I think I have such a base, and I try not to forget what I have learned, and I try not to forget what life is like for people who don't necessarily live in the state or live in the space that I live in. I return to Brownsville as much as I can in terms of like honoring like where I've been from. And even in like my work history, I've worked back in Brownsville even after I moved out of there.
Nice.
And I would also say it talks to where I live now in Massachusetts, because I do have to like remind myself I am not in Brownsville, and I don't live in Brownsville, and I haven't even lived in Brownsville for a decade. So the time has changed. And how am I giving back? How am I using what I have now learned outside of these spaces back into the community I've lived in? And I feel like the two keep me grounded in a sense. Like my experiences in Brownsville, and even now living here in New England, where I can see the Black experience change, or just experience of people who exist at other identities that I have, be it queer or be it a person who grew up poor. I can see how different things are and how it is for people. It's sort of similar to when I went to college. I lived in New York my whole life and lived in Brooklyn. Yeah, I went to a small college in Pennsylvania, which was kind of similar to it was a similar experience in terms of culture.
Wait, which college in Pennsylvania did you go to?
Tiny school called Juniata in Central PA.
Okay, I was going to say, was it Allegheny? Because I know people who went there, including an ex who shall not be named, who I don't speak with. But I'm glad it's not that. Sorry.
Nope. But Allegheny, I played rugby, so I've played them before. Like all those little, like the little hill towns, like, yeah. But I'd say a similar culture shock. And when I first went to school in Pennsylvania, it was my first experience of poor white people outside of learning about them on TV. Like, oh, y'all are on welfare too. You just gonna call me a nigga.
Yeah.
Like, I feel similar in Massachusetts. Like, oh, I can see where, like, you on drugs just like all my family. Like, you on the same type of drug, honey. Like, so it's helpful for me to also have that perspective of the world is different. And I think sometimes, no tea, no shade, no pink lemonade to my fellow New Yorkers, sometimes we think that is the center of the universe, and it's not. So I need to like touch grass outside, and I can actually touch grass in Massachusetts.
Yeah. But I mean, New York, unfortunately, when it comes to arts and culture, is the center of the universe, unfortunately, which I'm headed to New York to see a bunch of shows on Saturday. So I'm going to have an interesting perspective because I'm seeing Purpose, which won Best Play Tony and Pulitzer for drama. And then I'm seeing Audra. I'm not seeing Gypsy. I'm seeing Audra at 8:00. Like, I mean, like Gypsy is great, and the actors are great, but I've loved Audra since I was an undergrad, so like 20 plus years. So I'm like, people are like, you're going to see Gypsy. No, I am seeing Audra. But just thinking about like the cultural centers, and then I'll go into the next question because I think this will kind of encompass your cultural center a little bit, because I believe all artists, we have canons. Because I know for myself, I don't know how this happened. Well, originally I didn't know how it happened until I had this moment of I always have these weird aha moments at times when I'm doing something completely different. Like I had the aha moment when I had friends over and we were watching the movie Sing Sing, because I was like, y'all need to see this. What do you mean you've never heard of it? And I had this aha moment in terms of like why I do what I do. So in my writing, I write a lot about class, socioeconomic differences, and gender. And for some reason, I can write really, really strong. I've been told I can write really, really strong male characters. And I'm like, why? Like, I don't understand that. Very strong cishet male characters. And I realized it the other day. Growing up, my dad was like heavily involved in basketball leagues and all these things. And he always took me to work with him. He worked at the state psychiatric hospital back in Michigan. And so I was and like his friends were always over. And I'm like, oh, I was around a lot of cishet men all the time. And I'm like, oh, this is where I can write them. So it didn't click until we were watching Sing Sing together. And that was my second time watching Sing Sing. And I was like, oh, Oh, okay. So this leads into the next. I'm actually going to cut a question because of time. But how would you say that your voice and creative canon has evolved over time? What informs it? Terms of like in terms of lived experience, training, or both? And how do you keep your craft and skills sharp? Because I'm not gonna lie, not to call out your spouse, but I know your spouse. Your spouse is uber educated, has a bunch of letters behind their name. Like I would love to know because I don't know your educational background. I'm like, I bet you're probably the same as well. So
Oh, this is like such a wonderful question. To get the education out the way, which truthfully, I have to do a better job at communicating more of my education. I feel like after I left grad school, I went full steam ahead into organizing and now full steam ahead into my artistry. I graduated my undergrad with a degree in psychology and an almost minor in philosophy, which makes a lot of sense. And I have an MSW, Master's of Social Work, with a policy practice concentration. So hence I've done policy for a long time. And I really need to
cool.
lean more into my macro social worker bag because I very much am. And that's my own issues with academia and truthfully student loans. So Miss Sally Mae can miss me. Um,
Yes.
but oh, going back to your question, what are the canon events and how has my voice evolved? So not to bring Juniata into this, but Juniata had an old tagline, my college, and it was think, evolve, act. And I loved that. And I would also like to flip that. So I think as a value, I lead with a lot of my values, and my values show so much in my writing and my artistry and my organizing, my values of wanting to be a part of a community, wanting to be accountable to a community, wanting to be responsible and take shape for the social movements that are around me. Those are values that I hold. My creative voice and the events that have really shaped that over the years have been a few things. Starting in 2021, truthfully, I had a nervous breakdown,
Oh
as one does.
wow.
And I was dealing with a lot of grief. And grief is a theme that shows up a lot in my writing. And I was
Mhm.
dealing with a lot of grief of having lost many family members directly or indirectly due to COVID-19. Um, I was dealing with a lot of
Oh.
a lot of changes in my relationship. My things with my partner and I were getting very serious, and that was, it changes your life, and so much was just happening to me on a personal and even just all of us on a global scale. And that nervous breakdown genuinely changed my voice because since then, a lot of my writing has become self-reflective. And
Mm.
I've during that year prior to the nervous breakdown, I had become a director at my job that I had had for nearly 4 years at the time. And I remember writing on like Facebook or something, I'm working on my voice. I'm working on figuring out what that is. Cue in this nervous breakdown, and I couldn't stop but create art. Everything that poured out of me was grief, poems about my body changing, poems about or short stories where the characters I realized were not just characters, but they were people in my real life. And so that I think shaped a lot of my voice where I had to not be okay, but just be more comfortable and more accepting of the fact that I'm now in an era since 2021 till now where a lot of my art is self-reflective as a way to get stuff out, and other things and other canon events that have changed that have also elevated my creative voice. In 2023, I left a job that I had for 5 years. It was a big change for me. A couple months prior to that, I had lost a friend and a family member, content note to suicide. That had changed a lot of my writing. And I found it much easier to start communicating themes that were often difficult for people to talk about, not just grief, but themes like, are you acting in line with your values? How does that show up in your everyday life? Themes of connection and feeling misconnection. My artistry grew to be able to synthesize and communicate highly complex ideas of how do I talk about the grief of losing a family member, while also talking about the grief of our collective loss with COVID-19, while also make it a lighthearted enough story that can bring a lot of people in to an unexpected conversation and leave them with a thought that they can then bring to their kitchen table, which to me is like the most important thing. So like my voice has evolved, I think, over these very traumatic events and also a lot of beautiful events, because I got married in 2023. Moving can be a drag, but I moved to a great state where I'm out foraging and on the trail so much. So it's like the grief and the joy have really shaped me over these years and have shaped both my voice and how I like what my creative process and what my creativity looks like.
Which I will never forget because of course I knew Stephanie first. Just to tell a really quick personal story, and this can lead into the next question. I will never forget when I found out y'all got married. I was on Instagram just randomly one day and I was like, wait, huh? I saw your picture and I was like, wait, the one where I believe you were both under one of your veils and like in a very intimate pose. And I was like, wait, Stephanie got married? Wait, Stephanie was dating somebody, because I haven't talked to Stephanie in a couple of years. And I was like, and so I just started clicking through your photos and I was like, oh my God, y'all were gorgeous. Oh my God. I was just like, yes. I was so happy for both of y'all, including you. And I didn't even know you yet. So
Thank you.
yeah. So I'm just glad that like the two of you have one another, because you're both especially talented, especially very smart and brilliant. And I also love, because that was the other thing too. Like I had a conversation with my family, because I'm from Detroit, and they're like, you don't plan on moving back home? No. Because I love the access to so many different things here. Like I love camping. I don't know if I'll get to foraging, but like I love camp. We have an RV. I love camping. Yes. I love camping. I love just the access to culture. Like I believe this is the only region in the country where like almost all the states, except for New Hampshire, embraces the arts. Yes, I called out New Hampshire.
Yeah.
New Hampshire is its own, they need to be their own like sovereign state. And then I just love like how easy it is to get to New York City. Like it's even easier to get to New York City from Connecticut than it is from Western Mass. Like my brother and I, we're going Saturday morning, coming back Sunday morning. And there's 2 train stations on either side of our street. We can get to one or the other within like a mile or 2. And
Amazing.
I like New York, especially as an artist who is a professor and teaches the arts. I hate to say this, but New York right now is the epicenter for a lot of things. And it's, even though there's other arts districts, like Chicago is really big in theater, Houston's really big in theater, there's parts of Florida, everyone's destination is New York to have theater done. So yeah, like that was a whole lot So the next question that I have for you is, and I hope to make it out to one of these events because I've seen them online and they look super cool. You are the founder and director of Action Arc Labs, a social change organization that combines organizing and storytelling to build power. Can you talk about your work through this organization, and how does this work continue your personal and professional mission?
Truly, madly, deeply, if I were to write a book on my life, this chapter would be called Reluctant Entrepreneur. And I say that with love and acceptance of self and a little bit of, poking fun at myself. I started Action Arc Labs after I'd left an organization I was with for 5 years. It was a big change for me. I am a serial monogamous when it comes to being an employee. I love being able to survive. And when I left my job, right, I gotta work. And if I could find one place that's like, great, I'll work there. But I had left my job of 5 years and I knew I wanted something different. I could have continued and just did the same thing what I was doing, which I left as the director of organizing, very much in line to be the executive director of an organization. And it just was not for me. It was just not in my ministry at that time. And I'm so grateful that I took a chance and changed and now moved to doing something different. And so truthfully, I began Action Arc Labs because one, the job market is terrible, and it was pre-Trump, so I don't want to make it seem like the orange man is the sole reason behind it, but it was like that previously. Hello, Democrats, you have a problem.
Yep, I
And
am.
and the job market was awful. And I found that I was an amalgam of these really strange things. Like, I could write a little bit. I have experience as a performer. I'm also an organizer. I can do a lot of digital security and digital tech. I love training people. I'm a very skilled facilitator. And I wanted to do organizing and artistry in a way that had both depth and breadth. And Action Arc Labs being an organization where I can combine elements of storytelling and organizing felt like a prime space for me to do so. And as an example of like what one element of my work looks like, I right now am training other organizers and other organizations and groups in different tactics for their campaigns, while also working with them in building storytelling arcs and trying to work with them to talk about what their narrative is going to be. Narrative work is so woven into organizing because if you can't communicate and if you can't tell a story about why your issue is important, people won't pay attention. And I think it's sometimes really easy as an organizer to say, like, well, everyone should pay attention. Well, they should, but we also are living in an era of human history where people are inundated with like hundreds of ads every single day and bright primary colors and things are vying for their attention. And so maybe in 1875, when everybody all lived in our small villages and we could really communicate, you know, and that's a really reductive version of history, but I think it's time for organizers to do more creative tactics. And for those of us who take a responsibility in social movements, I think it's also our job to look at our movements and have the hard conversations of what has really been working and what has not been working and how do we adjust. And so Action Arc Labs is my attempt at creating a space where we can experiment with arts and organizing and try to do something different than what is traditionally done in either an artist space that tries to do a little bit of organizing that really looks like, you know, supporting at rallies and maybe showing up with like, you know, at an event here and there, and do more of organizing groups where their sole mission is building power, building power, building power, but they don't take the time to genuinely build deeper relationships with people and think creatively aside from the science of organizing, because it really is a science.
Yeah, because actually, with some of my middle schoolers this summer, I'm having them write TED Talks. And it's been really interesting experiencing what it's like to not really be aware of the world around you at that age. And it's really scary because I'm like, when I was their age, I went to see Malcolm X with my school. I was very, I didn't know the words at the time, but I was very social justice aware. I knew about difference. Like my parents, they were huge, like on voting, giving back. They participated in food drives during the holidays. I knew about the social ills from very, very young. The students now, and I have ages 11 to like 14, 15. The TED Talks have been really or at least having them do TED Talks have been very eye-opening because many of them, they never made the connection between what is it that they find wrong in society and the injustice that's caused it. And so it's been really beautiful to kind of watch that. But at the same time, I'm just like, how many young people are getting this? Because I am very, very scared of what's going to happen over the next 10 years because we have a lot of young people who depend heavily on AI to do everything for them. Many of them don't know how to speak in public. And also some of them, they speak like this. I'm like, I can't hear you. Like I spend most of the 45 minutes per class. I can't hear what? And so we are, but I feel like we've been doing this since NAFTA, as you say, which is both parties are a hot mess. Both parties have been a hot mess. But and also No Child Left Behind. It's like, I can see how we got to this current moment of Mango Mussolini, and that over decades and decades and decades, we've been teaching people how not to be aware of the world around them, how to shut off and pay attention to what we're becoming China a little bit, which is very scary. Like, I'll never forget one night, my husband was watching this documentary on like China and like how they spew out media and how they filter media and what you can and can't watch. And I was like, oh my God, we've been here for a minute, and it's getting worse. And I'm just afraid that, like, especially now that I have had so many students, including college, using AI to write their papers. And I keep telling them, I don't like, it's not that you shouldn't use AI. The problem is AI is very deceptive. Like, I had a student, I won't say where or who or the topic, but she was supposed to write on one particular thing. She put in the thing, but got a paper on something completely different, didn't read it, submitted it, and flunked. And I'm like, I was like, AI is very deceptive. It is not meant to work for you. So stop using it. Okay. Rant done. Like,
Oh, your concerns are so valid.
and so I just love that you have a space, and people don't realize how much goes into organizing. It's not just knocking on doors. It's not just phone calls. Like, building your elevator pitch. Like, there's a lot of things that go into that, and like really understanding and making the connection between your values, how you show up in the community, and what you communicate out to folks to get them involved.
These are the conversations, like everything you're sharing are the things that keep me up at night. And it's also why I'm encouraging myself to do more filmmaking, truthfully, because I want to do more series of videos. I want to do a series of videos on straight up, like, it's a combination of like productivity, lifestyle, but just what you need to know in this current society, because we are losing skills. For example, certain skills like synthesizing. I mentioned that earlier in the show, and I hear you naming a little bit of that too. Like, students don't even have the ability to say, I know this thing, this is connected to this thing, and there's something a little bit in here. I can talk about all three of those complicated things in maybe one essay. How do I actually write that?
Yeah.
People don't know how to do that skill, and they're using, ChatGPT or whatever LLM that they're using, to put the things together for them, but it's not going to work. And we're going to enter it's going to be, we can't even get to a space where we're organizing or even doing more creativity if our folks don't know how to think for themselves. And last thing I'll say about this on this rant, because like I said, it keeps me up too. It's everyone, not just the young people, but even the adults that I have met who now, rely on ChatGPT as therapy or rely on ChatGPT. Oh yeah, if you go on a video on TikTok about AI, and it's people will say, yeah, I talked to ChatGPT to help me figure out a conversation. It's like, yes, this model is learning from you. And I do think there are a lot of benefits to AI. And I know we're entering an era, we're in techno-fascism. We are in a techno-fascist era, which I know it's like a big word, and it's like, what the hell does that mean? It's like, but this is what happens when the tech bros are now the ones in power. First, it was like a lot of the businessmen and slave owners were once in power, and now it's the tech bros who are once in power, who are still using the same type of slave labor, because who's charging the tech? It's the people in the DRC mining for these metals in caves and risking their lives.
Yeah.
For you to use ChatGPT.
I need to do a whole other, because like I use a lot of AI. I tell my students, I'm like, AI is not bad, it's how you use it. Like, I use AI literally to create all of my stuff, like all of my art. I use Canva. And then when I'm editing things, I use Podcastle, which is AI, which helps me, because I used to use Audacity. I was like, oh my God, this is taking so long. But now I use Podcastle, and it has simple plugins. So I'm like, I feel like AI is to supplement, it's not to replace.
I love Audacity, by the way. I first learned of Audacity in 06, 07 when I interned for a radio show on National Public Radio. Yeah. And that's what got me into both filmmaking and audio editing, because the show used Audacity back then. And I still use it to this day. Very complicated. So,
yeah. So this segues really nicely. And I just have a couple more questions for you. So you will be screening your film Be Here Now on Thursday, July 10th at 6 p.m. at Whitneyville Cultural Commons, 1253 Whitney Avenue in Hampden, Connecticut. Can you offer us a high-level overview of the film, what inspired the film, and what folks can expect when watching the films? By the way, folks who are joining us, we will be playing the trailer for you at some point during this as well.
Ooh. Be Here Now is a short film about an unemployed writer and activist with a fear of clowns who comes home and finds a clown version of themselves in their bedroom. So, together, the two of them talk about existence, resistance, and what it means to be human. So that's the description of what Be Here Now is about. And it really draws from my experiences as an organizer and a writer. And full disclosure, I do have a fear of clowns. Claustrophobia is very real. And for years, I've wanted to do a film about organizing. Wanted to do it, had ideas of doing an anthropological study. And then I wanted to interview organizers. And over the years, since 2023, at the beginning of 2023 is when I first had this idea. I wanted to do this. And the world has changed so much since then, not just only in my personal life. And finally, it was last year when I was in a fellowship with Brew Forge, where we had to do a community share back project about what we learned from our time in the fellowship. And the only thing that came to me is I need to make my short film. And so I made this film about my experiences, which felt very cringy and self-centered at the time, but that's because it was my lack of acceptance of being in the space where I'm doing self-reflective art. But once I accepted that, it was go time. And so I did everything soup to nuts, produced the film with funding from Brew Forge, wrote the script, shot the film, edited the audio in Audacity. And it's really an opportunity for me to not only tell my story of what it means to sit at this intersection and how I got here, but it was also an opportunity for me to face myself and my fears, no pun intended with the fear of clowns, but two, to really talk about the parts of the self that rarely see sunlight, that we as humans don't allow ourselves to accept. So while this film is very much at the intersection of like this being this like Black queer radical body, there are themes in this film that I think anybody can experience and really relate to.
Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna lie, the fear of clowns, it's real. Like I'll never forget. Yeah, because I watched one of my favorite shows is Frasier, and they actually talked about that on one of the episodes. I'm one of those. But also I'm just like, how if you have a fear, and then I would love to play the trailer. How if you have a fear of clowns? How did you make this film?
I was very much inspired by other artists who did self-reflective art and like creative nonfiction,
Oh,
be it Michaela Cole for Chewing Gum and I May Destroy You. Uh, Fantastic series, both of them.
yes.
Julio Torres, who did Fantasmas, and even Charlie Chaplin, who played an infamous clown, the Tramp, which is when you think of clown, you often think of Charlie Chaplin because he
Mm-hmm.
has such a hold on American culture. But I read a lot of work, but I watched a lot of their work. And I read Misfits, which is a book that Michaela Cole wrote, and I wanted this to really address myself. And I can't
Mm-hmm.
tell James Baldwin, he has a quote that he shared with Nikki
Yes.
Gio. Yes, love him. He has a quote
Oh.
that he shared in his interview with Nikki Giovanni, where he's talking about his writing, and he says, "I can only tell you so much about yourself if I can talk to myself and figure out how much of myself I can stand."
Mm.
So I can't talk to anyone about organizing or accepting themselves or building power if I won't even face myself to see how am I doing those things? Am I doing those things? Is it one
Mm.
thing I'm saying, but is it actually reflected in my actions? I can't ask someone to do something that I won't do. So I can't work in the field of criminal justice reform or work in the field of drug policy reform and
Mhm.
not acknowledge the fact that my father was a correctional officer or acknowledge the fact that I've had family members who died due to HIV/AIDS because they were intravenous drug
Wow.
users and who started using drugs because they were Vietnam vets. I have to address those demons in myself before I can tell any other person to share their experience with this lawmaker or, talk to other people in their community about their experiences.
You have a memoir right there. I'm like, your father was Muslim and a correction officer?
Yes. A strange amalgam of different things. And aren't we all? I think we all carry these like things that may feel contradictive or strange or surprising. And it's not even about like I've had to accept myself so much and not shirk away from these things that I have maybe wanted to not believe or ignore for something else for my own comfort, I've
Right.
had to not shirk away from them and just get curious. Like, oh, okay, maybe this is why you've been in criminal justice reform, because you vowed to be everything your father was not. Or maybe this is why you deal with drug policy reform, because you had a mother that had an alcohol addiction, and that's so real and not talked about. So my curiosity has also helped me. My first tattoo is a question mark on the back of my neck, so I try to remain
Wow.
curious.
Nice. And I love that. I learned that from I'm gonna shout out Isabel Garcia from Estoy Key, which is
Mm.
on suicide prevention. And I remember one of the first times I met her and asked her about her work, and she's just like, just be curious, ask questions. You will be surprised what you learn if you are open to being able to truly engage. And the truly engage part is to be curious.
That's
It's
so real. Thank you for that quote. I'm gonna look that up.
mm,
And wow.
yes. And speaking of, I'm curious, we're gonna play the trailer now. So I'm gonna take us off and then play the trailer.
So much for living the dream and becoming an artist. Universe, please give me a sign, because this is not it. Asada, give me strength.
You are worth more than a paycheck.
I guess I'm just trying to make up for the fact that I quit my job to become a writer, and that's the one thing I can't seem to do. Write. Just want to do something meaningful, you know? I found my slingshot. I only got it because I hate clowns. It's more of a joke, really. Bum, 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 bum. Cobra. It's the year with a snake in it. The woman was too stunned to speak. I'm having another nervous breakdown. Well, yes and no. But it's not the entire picture. What is happening? I'm here because you summoned me. All that Asada, give me strength. All that universe, show me the way. Well, meet the way. Okay, riddle me this. You're supposed to be me. Why do you have an English accent? What the hell is your problem? That is my problem. I don't have a problem with you. It's you that has a problem with me. You can't even stand to look at yourself in the mirror. It's been months now and you can't even look at yourself. Stop trying to make me feel small. Let's take a group trip and I'll be the big scary clown you want me to be.
That was brilliant. And that was just the trailer. Oh, no, they're frozen. Ah, I'm going to take them off and bring them back on. Ah, okay, take two. That was brilliant. And that was just the trailer. Ah, what? Yes.
Thank you so much. And forgive me, I had my old when I had the premiere information at the very end, but thank you. What a time.
Wow. And did you do that in your home?
I did. I had so many ideas about like I need to find a studio, and like I have to rent a space and I have to rent all these sound equipment to make my film. And I thought to myself, girl, you got to make stuff from where you are. How are you going to, again, how are you going to tell people a tenant in harm reduction is meet people where they are? You got to meet yourself where you are. So don't expect you to have, you know, a big studio and big screen budget. Expect you to have the budget you got so that you could build up towards it. So yes, I built it in my spare bedroom and outside on my deck.
Which, I mean, Black Panther did a lot of like CGI, so, and they had a big budget. So I'm just saying.
Hey, Ryan Coogler, man, that. Shout out to Ryan Coogler.
Which I need to reserve a time to find. I have not seen Sinners yet. And I love Southern Gothic. And I'm just like, I haven't seen Sinners yet. So I need to make time to do that very soon.
If you want a buddy, I will go with you to see it again.
Yes. And as promised, I wanted to get you out soon. So, Kenyatta, what is next for you in terms of your own work, and how can the Recasting the Culture community support you on this journey?
Hmm. So what's next for me? I'm going to continue doing screenings of Be Here Now. I have a couple of film festivals. I'm excited to screen it. So definitely check out my website at kmrobles.com and you'll be able to see all the upcoming events. I'll have this screening in Connecticut, and I also plan on having a virtual screening and potentially one in New York as well, New York City. Always go back to your roots. I also plan on doing more with Action Arc Labs regarding putting out resource guides for artists and organizers who want to build deeper habits for productivity and their own artistry, as well as creating new series on TikTok around just radical readings. That's something I started a couple years ago and I want to continue to build up. And a series on just sharing more trainings and things that I've learned over the years. And I train people on like power mapping, even using AI for the movement, which is a training I'll be doing this month in July in Waterbury, Connecticut. So definitely stay connected with me on my website at kmrobles.com. Thank you, Nicole, for putting it up. Or just check me out online at K_Muzzanni. That's Muzzanni, double Z, double N. So K_MUZZANNI.
Yes, and I would love to chat with you, one, about I'm feeling this synergy that we need to collaborate on something. Like, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it because I've always wanted to do film. It's just, it's a skill set that I don't have. Like, I feel like I'm a strong storyteller, but when it comes to the technical aspects of like editing, which I've done a little bit of film, like in grad school, but I'm like, the editing process, I feel like if I had the time, I could really dig deep into it. But I would love at some point to chat about collaborating, which I know between me, you, and Stephanie, we're gonna see each other at some point, hopefully in real life. And then it'll be so great to see Stephanie. I have not seen Stephanie in a minute.
Heck yeah. I'm always down. Nicole, you are a phenomenal artist. So I'm down to like do whatever. Whenever you call, I'm like, yep, I'm in. Just count me in.
Like, I'll never forget when I called you about being on here. You answered the phone. I don't even think the phone rung. It was like, hello. I was like, yeah.
I was like, for you? Yes. Oh, 100%. Because I know you mean business. And that's something I feel like I've learned to in artistry. Like you meet people, like the synergy may be there, but sometimes, like everybody has different like styles of work. I'm like, no, you're about your business. If you're doing something, I know you're doing it at like a certain degree. And I'm here with you, Nicole.
Yeah, when you mentioned the nervous breakdown, I'm like, me and my Zoloft. And I feel like I may have had one last year when I left my full-time, got laid, like, and it was horrible, got laid off. But I've been like, I told somebody the other day, me and my mental illness, because it runs in my family, I've been rocking it for a while. I'm like, if you're going to be with me, it's going to be a polyamorous relationship, because it's going to be me and my generalized anxiety disorder and everything else. So yeah.
Period. That's how I show up.
Yeah, all of it. Like, all of it. I'm like, ah.
Oh man, this is great.
Yes. So, Kenyatta, thank you so much for being on. It's 6:04. Go do your D&D.
Thank you so much. I hope everyone has a fantastic evening, and I hope you especially have a great evening, Nicole. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenyatta. Have a great night.
Ciao.
So thank you all for joining me today for Recasting the Culture. Be sure to RSVP for Be Here Now, which is playing on Thursday, July 10th. I got the date wrong, and as they were talking, I fixed it. It's July 10th. I don't know why. I was 11th, because I'm seeing it all during the 12th, so I need to make sure I keep my calendar together. I will be back on July 20th with playwright, producer, professor, and anthropologist, Dr. Haile Ishe Cole, to talk about Belly, the choir poem, which will premiere on August 1st through 3rd at Central Connecticut State University. I proudly serve as the associate producer on the show and will be leading the talkback after the Sunday, August 3rd performance. Be sure to follow me on Instagram at Coco_PenExplore, or subscribe to my YouTube channel to receive updates on the guests that will be joining us this summer on the series. Lastly, of course, I, as an independent, have to do this. Please support independently produced media. Recasting the Culture and the award-winning Black Writers Read are all self-funded and self-produced endeavors. Please consider making a monetary gift to this platform. All gifts will continue to help me sustain the platform and reach more and more folks. So thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Recasting the Culture. Be here, be aware, be someone, and be loved.